Hello and welcome back. Today we are going to be doing a rundown of Dev Diary number 75, which lists some of the diplomatic improvements in patch 1.2. Patch 1.2 is live. You can, or it's not live yet, it's in a public open beta. So what you can do is you can right click on Victoria 3 in Steam, and then click properties, and then click, I think it's betas, and then this is kind of how you opt in if you wanted to. It's buggy, stuff's happening, this sort of thing. Alright, let's get into it. Notably, it has some of the stuff in here. Can't colonize Hokkaido now. Yeah, you're telling me. All right, let's get into it. Open beta is in full swing. Things are going pretty well. The first improvement we're going to go over is colonial claims. So this is a pretty big one, and it dramatically changes what the strategy is as far as expansion goes with colonization, prevent some of the ahistorical nonsense we have going on in colonization in the moment, such as countries rushing for Hokkaido, before Japan can get it, or United States setting up in La Plata region. I think that's where Tierra del Fuego is. Currently, or before this, at least in 1.1, the strategy is to go for the areas that don't have any malaria very, very quickly, and the ones such as Hokkaido has a ton of resources and can get gold. La Plata also has a ton of resources. No more of that. Now, the system, you have countries that have claims. As long as a country that has a claim, let's see, we're going to scroll down. Any country which doesn't have a claim is blocked from colonizing as long as a claiming state maintains an interest there. So, for example, if Japan has an interest in Japan, which they always do, you cannot colonize Hokkaido unless you were to also have a claim, something like this. I believe down here they have a picture of you being able to declare war. But let's go back for a second. While we're on the topic of colonization, I think we should mention another change we've made, which is changing how diplomatic, native uprising diplomatic play works. In 1.1.2, a colonizer that defeats a native uprising would annex the entire decentralized nation. This is what's on the 1.1 patch, and it's like, it makes the metagame such that you want to provoke them as much as possible, as often as possible, because you just annex the whole land, which led to some weird pacing and balance issues. Yeah, you're telling me. This has been changed instead to give the colonizer special colonial rights diplomatic pact with defeated natives, which lasts for the duration of the truce. During this period, colonization speed is doubled and further uprisings cannot occur. So this, combined with the auto queue, actually makes it so that, colonial exploitation before this patch was just way, way, way better, especially because you get the 10% throughput bonus, than colonial resettlement, whatever the other one's called. I don't even know what it's called because it's so much worse. Now, this combined with the auto queue, the fact that you don't provoke and annex them faster means colonial resettlement will colonize faster. They've also included, at least in the patch 1.2.1 notes, that the cap for colonization speed is they doubled it so that you can colonize. The max speed is 25 days, so you won't hit the cap as easily, so the extra colonization speed is even better from colonial resettlement, and you don't full annex when you provoke them, so this means you will actually expand colonies much, much faster with colonial resettlement, and this is a pretty big deal, combined with the fact that the auto queue, generally speaking, I think you want to build most of your manufactories in your own, incorporated states rather than unincorporated states, and you don't want to incorporate the overseas colonies, these types of stuff. Colonial exploitation makes it so that the labor is cheaper in the colonized states, which makes it so that when the auto queue capitalists are deciding whether to build, they're more likely to build in colony land or unincorporated territories, which is not what you want. If you have colonial resettlement, however, there isn't the minus 25% threshold for getting the countries or getting the population out of the subsistence farms on the newly acquired colonial territory. And so because of this, it might be the case that colonial resettlement is okay now. I still think the 10% throughput juice is like a pretty big deal, but maybe resettlement's better now. Maybe it's situationally better, but this is something to keep in mind. Okay. It's no longer possible to simply snipe Hokkaido away from the Japanese shogunate, as they start with a claim on Ainu-controlled portions of that island. Very, very good. This was like the strategy, the first place to go to. Now it's no longer the case. Okay. Next up is diplomatic plays, which allow countries to expand their primary demands. I think that I think that you can declare a war to revoke the claim. I'm not sure exactly how that works, or that it's a possible thing you could do. So if you fight Japan, you could get them to revoke their claim on Hokkaido, something like this. I'm not 100% sure, but this is, I think, something that they're either working on or is present. Okay. Next up is change to diplomatic plays, which allow countries to expand their primary demands into play. This is fantastic. Generally speaking, once you became really, really strong, you would just declare, and you would declare for one war goal, and then the opponents would back down, and it would lead to the situation where you were gated just by the amount of wars you could declare, and it's made expansion feel very, very strange. You would just, like, take one territory, they would back down, and you would try and, in order to, like, kneecap great powers, you would, like, you would take one state and then you would try and release a bunch of nations, but they'd back down, so you would never release the nations, and you'd just slowly try and cut their market in half so that half their economy lost market access, something like this type of strategy, and this way it would decay them into a major power when you could then vassalize them, this sort of thing, which is just like very artificial. Now you can add multiple primary war goals, but it will incur a lot more infamy, and so if you want to go like full infamy route, this makes expansion a lot better. Okay. AI has a tendency to back down against them in plays, ceding one war goal at a time. This is kind of what I said. And setting in a 5-year truce. Also, notably, the AI seems a bit more aggressive about fighting wars, especially existential wars, if you're annexing them, and they don't just back down as much anymore if you're annexing them or vassalizing them, unless you have a secondary war goal. It seems to be the case to me. And so if you go for a vassalization play, and then you have war reparations, if this is the case, they tend to back down more. It seems to be more testing is required. I don't know exactly how the AI calculates stuff. Okay, before the demand can be made, while this fits with the design principle, there should be a reason to back down. The end result could be unduly frustrating and it wasn't just an issue for the player either, as AI of USA struggled to reach the West Coast and could only take one state off of Mexico at the time. True. Okay. To address this in a way that directly tackles the problem while still ensuring that this simply isn't always best to take your choices in a war, we've changed to the concept of primary demand. And the way primary demands work is you have to invest extra infamy and maneuvers, but you can make multiple primary demands, and also when you invite someone into a war, the whatever invitation thing you gave on them will also be a primary demand. So, like, let's say you're playing as Syria and you are annexing some Ottoman land and you invite Russia, offering them one territory, right? That will now be a primary demand, so if they back down, they'll both get enforced, which I think is key, because it used to be the case you would just offer stuff to great powers, and then they would join in on the war, and then the war would never pop off because they would just always back down, and so the great power would always get nothing from it, which just seemed like a very, very backward mechanic. Okay. Primary war goals will all be enforced when the enemy backs down, and secondary demands, which will only be relevant if the play escalates to war. Perfect. Just as it works now, the first war goal added is always primary demand, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Any war goal targeting your main opponent or any of their subjects can be made into a primary war goal. You can't add primary war goals on people who joined the war. So, for example, if you declare a war on Great Britain to take London and France joins on the enemy's side, you cannot also make taking France a primary war goal, something like this. All right, and then the AI understands this and will play higher value on primary demands, since they are much more likely to actually receive what's promised in the war goal at the end. So this is just how the AI works in terms of demanding stuff. Secondary, all war goals you could add yourself can be made into primary demands if they target the main opponent. We discussed that. This means that adding more primary demands for yourself ensures that you receive them if you end up making the countries back down. This isn't free. The expense of adding more war goals or swaying more countries to your side is done at the expense of that, because it takes more maneuvers, and also you incur more infamy. Okay. We hear the cost of expanding your primary demands is relative to the cost of the war goal. So in the case of taking small and decapitated, depopulated states of Utah, it's quite low. So we have a nice little picture here, which this is fantastic. Again, still, if you're going to be expanding with the principle of staying under 25 infamy, you're probably not going to add many primary demands, and so expansion will be the same. But if you decide to go for a lot of infamy, it's going to be different. And in the case of really, really small multi-state countries, like the example of Sulawesi, who's in Indonesia, they have 3 states. states, but they like all cost like 1.5 infamy to take. You could just full annex them, make all the things primary, so that way they can't back down to get out of it, as opposed to what used to be the strategy. You would have to vassalize them and annex them, and it would take 2 wars, this type of thing. Now it doesn't. So this makes world conquest, I believe, a lot easier, although countries that are getting annexed are more likely to go to war, it seems, and so this makes world conquest harder in this way. Okay, let's move on. On the topic of AI, we move on to the final topic for the Dev Diary, peace and war exhaustion mechanics. I've noticed this change quite nicely. I think that these changes are really, really good. Let's jump into them. War exhaustion, of course, is the rate at which the country's war support drops. At a minus 100, they have to capitulate. In the 1.12 version of the game, the main driver of war exhaustion was the occupation of territory, particularly Wargoals in the capital, leading to the much maligned just naval invade Berlin meta. Yeah, so it used to be you just navally invade capitals and you would just crush the AI, and you would be able to enforce really easy. In particular, USA and Beijing come up, in my mind, as the two most egregious situations, where USA landing DC is incredibly easy because it's an incredibly small state with almost no conscripts. You almost always get the landing, and then you'll full occupy the state instantly. And so it used to be really, really easy to enforce on USA, no matter like how like big they were. And the same with Beijing, where China's just this enormous country, and somehow you just land the capital and like you just enforce on them very, very easily. Now it is harder. In 1.2, you still get a war exhaustion from occupation, yes, but the amount of you gain from occupied Wargoals capitals is less. So you can't just snipe the capital and then sit on the capital and enforce very, very, very quickly. And war exhaustion from occupation of territory now scales non-linearly, with severity increasing rapidly as the country approaches full occupation. I think that this is fantastic. This means that just taking a little bit of a country isn't going to get a lot of, Wargoal or war support decay, but fully taking them will cause it to decay extremely quickly. So it seems to me that in wars where you just full occupy the enemy, that enemies will end up capitulating much, much faster. And in wars where you just partially occupy them and like they still have a fighting chance, you can't just like pull this sneaky landy and get them to enforce by just taking the capital real quick. Okay, a fully enemy-controlled Modena will still capitulate quickly, while Russia, that has lost control of a few states in the Caucasus, is barely going to be affected. Perfect. Instead, the primary driver of war exhaustion is now casualties and battles lost. This is a big change as well. And I've noticed this also makes making sure you're on the latest medical PMs seem a lot better. War exhaustion and casualties now scale, although casualties includes injuries, so I'm not sure exactly how that's calculated, now scale against the total available manpower for the country instead of its population. So a country with an army of 10,000 is going to be much more affected by 5,000 casualties than a country with 100,000, even if the two countries have the same overall population. Perfect. As more of the fighting force decays, is taken away in terms of casualties, you'll want to give up more likely. For available manpower, all regular battalions are counted, whether they're mobilized or not, but conscripts are only counted once they're actually called in. So calling in more conscripts can be a way to directly affect your war exhaustion rate. This is also interesting, where it creates a strategy where you could conscript just to avoid some war exhaustion, and also countries that are conscripting heavily are going to be able to have a much larger pool with which to lose manpower before they start decaying quite a lot, which makes having, an elite professional army that still a lot of people are going to die in is going to make it so you lose a lot more war support. I've noticed this in my play that I'm seemingly losing a good amount of war support despite the fact that I'm winning, and it's because I have a large percentage of casualties, or I'm losing a lot more war support from having more casualties than my opponent, proportional to the total army size, because I'm fighting with just like 50k or 50 battalions or 100 battalions or whatever, and they're fighting with like 250. So even though I'm like 3-1 killing them, I'm still losing more casualties proportional to my total army, which is, I think, how it should work. Okay. Further war exhaustion from casualties now scales against the percentage of battles proportional to battle size. So a battle of 100 battalions versus 100 battalions counts more than 5 versus 1 of your side that the war has that your side of the war has lost. This will make just defending fronts a lot better, because generally speaking, you're a lot more powerful on defense, and you can just defend, let them attack into you, and this sort of thing, because you'll win more of the battles. What this means is that a country which keeps winning battles can absorb far more losses than one which keeps losing them, and allows for a battlefield victory to play much more directly into achieving an overall victory of the war. Perfect. All right. Let's see. And then we have a nice little picture. Even though the amount of casualties relative to the army size are fairly similar owing to the massive Qing army, the British are losing war support at a much slower rate due to their string of battlefield victories. Okay, perfect. And then we see the war support for both China. We're getting a decay on China of 2.6 and then 0.6 for Great Britain. Okay. The AI for making peace has also received some upgrades, in addition to now just being better at constructing equitable peace deals through blah, 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 blah. The AI has also more likely to consider angles whether deciding or not a peace deal is acceptable. Firstly, a new factor has been added called Achievable Wargoal, where the AI looks at whether or not a Wargoal is likely to be gained by the side that holds it through the capitulation of the target if the peace deal is not signed. Such Wargoals, if held by the AI, will make them far more reluctant to sign peace unless those Wargoals are part of the peace, while simultaneously more likely to accept pressing Wargoals against them that they just lose anyway if the war continued. It seems to be that the AI, if they are losing the war, is much more likely to just give up, even if they have positive war support, and I think that this is a nice change. Still, there's some situations, I think any country that gets fully occupied should just capitulate immediately, but this is kind of a different thing. But what it does is it allows, countries will like surrender at like 50 war score. If they're going to lose anyways, they know they're going to lose. They're just like throwing the towel. They're like, whatever. They're not interested in trying to bleed you or themselves trying to keep the war goal. Secondly, the AI looks more at additional factors for peace, such as relatively size of the military of both sides, and other factors have been tweaked. This is also spectacular. In 1.1, used to be able to do weird stuff, like if you got a really nice landing on their capital, even as a really small country, they'd capitulate even if their army was way bigger, and it's like, this doesn't make much sense. I'm glad that they're changing it. Okay, that's all for today. This is, of course, not an exhausted list. There's a few other changes that I can't bring to mind right now, but I'm aware there's more changes than this as far as Diplo goes. That's been improved in diplomacy-wise in 1.2, and there are a number of improvements still planned for future open beta updates, particularly on making the diplomatic AI behave in a more plausible way and be better at sticking by important allies, but details on that will have to wait, blah, blah, blah. Next week, we will be talking about the 1.2 update as our tech lead Emil will talk about the improvements we've made to performance. See you then. Okay, so overall, kind of happy about this changes. The colonization change is definitely a big deal. I think that it makes it a bit more historic, and that this is nice. The war, like the AI behaving in terms of war goals, or sorry, having primary war goals or extra primary war goals does prevent the weird situation where in order to fight someone, you just every 5 years have to take one more province. You embargo them, you try and cripple their economy, all these things, and just nothing. Like, it takes forever to like nickel and dime these guys. But if you're willing to spend the maneuvers and the infamy, now you can just take a whole bunch from someone. So this is great. And the AI is much better about piecing out, both in terms of not giving up super easy if you just land their capital, but they should be able to win the war, and also giving up when there's like no chance of them winning the war. This does seem markedly improved, which is a nice thing. Again, if you want to play on the patch 1.2 open beta, what you can do is you can, in your Steam library, right-click it. I think it's properties, and then I think it's betas, and then you sign up for the 1.2 open beta. It's buggy still. I would recommend, in the settings for the game, turning off automated construction, because this seems to be a source of bugs. I'm not 100% sure. There's like a devastation bug that's particular that can brick like all your construction that you have to like figure out what's going on. But if you're interested in trying out some of these changes, you can. But that is all for today. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, do the YouTube algorithm stuff. It does help out. And then also have a good day.